I'm ready.
I looked back over the last, say, 6 of your Western Conference final appearances, and your team seemed to have an issue with scoring in that round.
Yeah.
And it's across multiple teams now. Is
Yeah.
there something about the system that I guess people figure out by the time you go that deep in the playoffs, or like I guess how do you look at what you can do to improve that track record?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the same things apply. You score enough to win in the first round and the second round. There's no change in the third round other than the teams are better, and there's less room and there's less time and everybody's dialed in. So, I don't think there's a thing where a switch goes off in the third round. I just think you're down to the tiniest of margins. Sometimes the other team's better. Sometimes they're, a lot of times they're tighter, they're better defensively, they're getting better goaltending, or they wouldn't be in the Final Four. So I think they kind of, go hand in hand. And that's why a lot of those games are, 2-1, 3-2. They're tight games. So there's always things you look at. I mean, I think in general, we didn't score enough in the playoffs like we did in the regular season. I think when you talk to scouting reports from other teams on us, I think they considered us a rush team. Got a lot of offense off the rush. You heard that consistently. And the reality is in the playoffs, rush dries up. You got to find other ways. Our power play was hot. We got some offense there, but you've got to find, the other offense outside of rush, and that's the hard offense. And that's in zone, getting to the net, the kind of offense that Florida's creating a lot of and has won with. So we've got to get more of that in our game. The other thing is I think there would have been some more rush there for us had we got leads in some games. Then the other team can't just defend and not, they took that away from us. When you're behind 15 out of the 18 games we played or whatever, to start, you're chasing the game. It's a lot easier to defend rush when you've got a lead. When you're behind in a game, then you have to open it up a little bit to try and get back in, and that's where our rush, probably would have appeared a little bit more if we could have got into that situation.
You mentioned Florida. So Florida, throughout the whole season, they score in that way. They don't rely on the rush.
Yeah.
Do you feel like your team kind of develops maybe some habits over the course of the season?
Yeah, I think every team's built differently too. Every team's built differently, and there's not one way to do things. Like, because Florida won, we can't go, okay, let's become the Florida Panthers. Like, let's go, they've got some special ingredients there, that you just can't go out and get to play that way. So, I just think we probably need to be more of a hybrid. I think we relied too much on that piece, and when it became tough because of the circumstances, behind in games, other teams taking that away, we had trouble getting to that secondary way of creating offense.
Pete, where is the balance of the disappointment of not getting where you want to get ultimately in the Stanley Cup?
Yeah.
Having the success in Bowling Pete, because you guys have 3 years in a row, where's the balance in that?
Well, it's tough, right? I mean, it's raw. Listen, we're singularly focused, and that's on winning a Stanley Cup. So it's hard to balance anything less than that. The reality of this game is there's 32 teams, and only one of them, gets to be that team that is happy at the end of the year and is in a good spot. And everybody else, feels like they came up short. So, but you do have to have perspective, and this group faced a lot of adversity this year with injuries and different things thrown at them, and they found a way to have a really good regular season. Despite that, it didn't go off the rails. Found a way to get through 2 excellent hockey teams in Colorado and Winnipeg in 2 series where we probably weren't favored in either one. One was a President's Trophy winning team, and the other one, was a team that was one of the hottest teams down the stretch, and everyone was picking to win a Stanley Cup. So, there's a lot of pride in in the work we did there. But, you know, it's hard when you're singularly focused on a Stanley Cup to get past the disappointment of not getting there. And sometimes it takes time. You know, sometimes that perspective comes with time.
After Game 5, you said that you felt like you had seen a good enough of a sample size of Jake against the Oilers, and
Yeah.
the status quo wasn't working. There's a pretty good chance you'll face them again in the
Yeah.
playoffs. Do you feel like you can
Yeah.
trust him against them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, listen, you know what? No one's a bigger fan of Jake Oettinger than me as a person or a goalie. Does that mean that, you know, he can't be coached or he doesn't have growth left in him? Absolutely. He's a young goalie. You know, he's a young goaltender. And, you know, I think, you know, from a coaching perspective, you know, we're 1-7 against that team at this time of year in the conference finals. So, you know, everything's on the table. Lineup decisions, goaltending decisions, you know, system decisions, you know, everything's on the table when you know, you're looking for some type of way to flip that momentum, because it you know, it's not a small sample size. 1-7 is not a small sample size. So, you know, but that's not just on Jake. That's on our entire group. I mean, we scratched veteran guys in order to try and change that. We moved guys up and down the lineup. We switched lines. We switched power play units. I mean, you know, you're looking for solutions in order to try and flip that momentum. And the goaltending is one piece of that. You know, I think Jake is the best young goaltender in the league. But that doesn't mean there's not still a learning curve and growth, you know, and, you know, that's all part of the journey.
Pete, when you pull Jake, is there a process to that? Do you talk to Jeff Reese quickly or anything like that, or is that just a decision?
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't have time, you know, so, you know, sometimes we don't have time.
Game 5, obviously, emotions run high. Are
Mhm.
there any concerns about you and Jake and your working relationship after this Game 5 pull?
No, I mean, like I told you, I think, you know, we wouldn't have been in that spot without Jake. Just like we wouldn't have been in that spot without a lot of other guys in that room. That doesn't mean that, you know, they can't be, you know, coached or moved around as a piece in our group in order to try and keep moving the group forward. And we did that with a lot of our players. You know, when I moved Jamie Benn to the fourth line, you know, does that ruin our relationship? You know, when I healthy scratched Dodonov, who I've had since he was 20 years old, you know, does that ruin our relationship? No, those aren't easy conversations. They, you know, as a player, you don't like that. I'm sure there's always some hard feelings, but those are, you know, those are the decisions we make, and, you know, we try and keep it as professional as we can, and it's all with one goal, and that's to try and keep the group moving forward.
What was the conversation like with Jake, either after the game or today, whenever it happened?
Yeah, I haven't had a conversation with him yet. We haven't had a chance.
At that point in the game, you're down 3-1 in the series. You're
Yeah.
going into it. Your backs are against the wall in a lot of ways. Then, like
Yeah.
you said, you give up 2 quick goals. Then Casey comes in because
Yeah.
of another goal. Did you consider putting Jake back in to start the second?
Yeah, we
period?
considered, like I told you, everything's on the table at that point. You're right. You're 1-7. You're down 3-1. You're just trying to get to Game 6. And I'll give you a little background, you know, that I never really, you know what, we had talked going into Game 4 in Edmonton. You know, Jake had played more than any goalie in the league, you know, and I think still has. And really, every other team had used 2 goalies other than Florida, who had played less games. So, I mean, you know, there was a conversation, is he wearing down? You know, he had an upper respiratory thing he was dealing with. You know, there was conversation within our coaching group about, you know, should we give this guy a rest, you know, for a night? You know, everyone else is using 2. Obviously, Edmonton had used 2. You know, is their guy fresher? I mean, that's all real conversation that goes on. So, I mean, that was on the table as a conversation as early as Game 4. You know, we didn't make that decision to do that, but we were talking about that. And when you're in that moment, you know, you're making that decision, you know, what's going through my mind is, you know, we need to stop the bleeding here. You know, our team looked tentative. We're down 2-0. you know, you're in the back of your mind, you know, is he a little bit fatigued? He's been through a lot. He's carried us through 2 rounds. You know, is he going to be a better goalie in game 6 and 7 for us fresh? You know, and can Casey come in and flip the switch for us here and give us a shot of energy, which he's done all year for us. So, I mean, that's the thought process, right or wrong, you know, and I know, listen, but I don't make those decisions lightly, and I don't make them, you know, not to hurt feelings, like, you know, and I don't, and there's nothing personal in it, and no one's a bigger fan of Jake Oettinger or Casey DeSmith than I am. You know, there's one motive, and that's, you know, how do we survive this and get it to a game 6? And so, you know, and I have to live with those consequences. If it works, you know, great. We're in Edmonton tonight, and you guys are telling me how an awesome a move it was. You know, and when it doesn't, you know, I've got to stand up here and do this, and I understand, but I can't coach. I can't make those decisions out of fear of doing this. I can't. That's not how I'm built.
They had 2 points in the series where McDavid scored kind of I think one of them you referred to as a backbreaker in game 3, where he comes in right before the end of the second period and gets
Yeah.
the goal, and then again
Yeah.
in game 5 too. He had that block shot
Yeah.
back home and that breakaway.
Yeah.
How much is that? I mean, Rantanen was kind of that
Yeah.
guys earlier
Yeah.
on. Is that just a case of they have that player, you know, one of a
Well, one team has that
one team
player.
has that player.
I mean, listen, I was on a Team Canada staff at the Four Nations where that same guy, you know, won us that tournament. So, I mean, he's the best player in the world. You know, having said that, you know, I thought overall we actually did a pretty good job on him. He was very opportunistic. A lot of it bled from us playing from behind. You know, we push a little bit too much, and then he was gone the other way. You know, I thought we got unfortunate in game 5. I mean, the block shot, and he's line changing right out onto his stick for a breakaway, and then the own goal off Lindy. You know, it felt like we were on the wrong side of a bunch of those this year in the playoffs. So those are hard to explain, but you know, yeah, I mean, he was a difference maker for sure.
We'll do 2 more questions in
Yeah.
the interest of time to get players out of here.
Brandon's about to start an 8-year stretch with this team. You've seen Pavelski do it. Can he be even better with the process of getting him in here and having a full off
Yeah.
season and all?
Oh, for sure. And you know what? Listen, I loved what I saw. I loved what I saw. He's built for this time of year. You can see why he's had success this time of year. You know, and I think you know, you saw the start of the leadership. You know, he started to get comfortable around the group and lead. And I think that's just going to be more and more as he gets more comfortable around our group here.
Last one to Owen.
Yeah.
The hot topic of handshake lines and coaches.
Yeah.
Your thoughts and the trade-off of letting the players have it versus we've seen when you've been mic'd up and the
Yeah.
things that go between former players. I mean, those are
Yeah.
social human moments too.
Yeah, you know what, that's a tough one for me. I understand where Paul's coming from, and I have great respect, obviously, for Paul. You know, I do enjoy the fact that, you know, I get a chance to acknowledge some of the great players that you have so much respect for on the other side, and a lot of players that have played for me at some point, because it's the only chance to really connect. But I also get that, you know, maybe there's other times for that. You know, the whole mic thing, I think, plays a part. I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you, some of that is, you know, I'm not comfortable really comfortable that all that's out there. I mean, a lot of those are personal messages amongst us that I'm not sure should be out there, as much as everyone loves the 24/7 behind the scenes stuff. You know, I'm not sure. So maybe it's better we don't put ourselves in that situation where all that personal messaging is going to be out there. Leah, go ahead. You had another one? You remember what it was?
Thank you. Jamie Benn, I know that
Yeah.
his future is kind of up in the air
Yeah.
at this point, and he had said last game he hadn't made any decisions, but what does it
Yeah.
take to be able to coach him?
Yeah, a phenomenal experience. I mean, I'm praying Jamie Benn's back. One of the best leaders I've been around. You know, I can't tell you how he, I can't do enough service to tell you how he led, even though personally, his own game wasn't in a great place. He wasn't playing a lot. He was in a totally different role than he's ever been in his career. It never affected his play or his leadership, and that's the ultimate test of leadership. It's not when things are going your way and you're playing all the time and you're contributing. I think it's easy to lead in those situations. I think the true test of character is, when things aren't going your way, but you can still find that inner strength in order to lead and message the right things, even though inside, your own personal space is not in a good space. So that's the ultimate testament to his character and captaincy.
One last thing, are there any injuries you can share?
Jim will fill you in on all that. All right, thank you.
Thank you.